The sun was blazing above the city park as children laughed and played on the jungle gym, their carefree joy bouncing off the pavement like echoes of a simpler world. But on the far end of the bench-lined walkway, near a rusting fountain, sat a man who didn't belong. His designer shoes were dusty, his $1,000 coat looked like it hadn't been ironed in days. His eyes, once sharp with purpose, now stared into the distance, red-rimmed and hollow. Nobody recognized him, nobody dared to speak, except for a little girl named Lily. Lily was 6 years old, her braided pigtails bouncing with every tiny step as she clutched a grape juice box in one hand and her mom's fingers in the other. She had come to the park hoping to see squirrels, but instead, her eyes locked onto the man on the bench. "Mum," she whispered, tugging at her mother's hand, "why does that man look so sad?" Her mother followed her gaze and hesitated. "I don't know, honey, maybe he's just having a hard day." Lily watched the man for a few more seconds before slowly pulling her hand away from her mum's grasp. She walked over, juice box still in hand, and stood in front of him. The man didn't notice at first. Lost in a fog of grief and regret, he was staring at the same water fountain where he used to come as a child with his parents, back when life was simple, before money turned everything into transactions, before he lost everything that mattered. "Hey, mister," Lily said softly. The man blinked, his eyes focusing slowly on the small figure before him. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her eyes were wide, sincere, and filled with the kind of compassion most adults had long forgotten. "You look like you need this more than I do," she said, and stretched out her hand with the juice box. The man stared at it, stunned, his throat tightened, but he said nothing. "Mummy packed too," Lily said reassuringly, "and I already drank one." He finally reached out, fingers trembling, and took the juice. A tiny smile flickered across his face, and he managed to whisper, "Thank you." Lily beamed. "You're welcome." Then she skipped back to her mother, who was watching with tears in her eyes. That man was Alexander Price, the billionaire, tech genius whose name had once graced magazines and television screens around the world, but his world had crashed. A scandal he didn't cause destroyed his company. Investors pulled out. He lost his fortune. Then, in a devastating twist of fate, he lost his wife to a sudden illness. And just last week, he buried his only son, who had taken his own life under the crushing pressure of the spotlight. He hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days. He hadn't eaten in 2. He had come to this park to sit in silence, and maybe disappear. But Lily's tiny act of kindness pierced through that darkness. He sipped the juice, the flavor sweet and oddly comforting, and for the first time in months, something warm stirred. In his chest it wasn't joy, not yet, but it was hope, a flicker enough to make him stand up, enough to make him walk, not to vanish, but to rebuild. The next day, Alexander found out who the girl was. He had quietly followed her and her mother at a distance to make sure they were safe. Her mother, Ava Thompson, was a single parent who worked 2 jobs and still barely made rent. Her kindness, he realized, wasn't taught in boardrooms or earned with billions. It was lived every day, in the small, quiet acts of goodness they showed the world. So Alexander made a decision. Weeks later, the world watched in shock as Alexander Price re-emerged not as a tech mogul, but as the founder of Project Lily, a non-profit dedicated to mental health and family support, named after the girl who saved his life with a juice box. He hired Ava Thompson as the project's director of community outreach. Their first initiative, free counseling for grieving families. The second, nutritious meals and emotional support programs for children and single parents across the city. Lily never understood the weight of what she had done that day. To her, it was just juice. But for Alexander Price, it was the lifeline he didn't know he needed. Years later, as Lily stood on stage graduating from high school, she was handed a full scholarship by the man she once gave a drink to in a park. And when she asked why, Alexander knelt beside her and said, "Because you taught me that the smallest kindness can rewrite someone's story." The camera zooms in on her smile as the screen fades to black. Message: it costs nothing to be kind, but to someone else, it might be everything.